That's brilliant.
Okay, ready? Three, two, one, and chat. We should be live. Let us know if you can hear us. We should be live now.
Yeah. I just did a whole long intro and none of it was heard. So if you guys can hear us, please let us know so that I don't waste my time.
Well, I see something's live on the channel, and yeah, the dog was in it. So I don't know if that went through, but it was fun. Um,
It's all going through. I can hear it on my end. You're good.
Okay, well there they go. All right. Cool. So anyway, welcome to Tactical Wisdom. We have a special guest today. We have Gideon from South Africa, our favorite and only South African guest. But he's here, so we're going to get there in a minute. What I wanted to do was bring in someone as we're looking at things happening in the Netherlands and Italy and Germany and kind of the entire world situation deteriorating. I thought I would bring in someone who is living through that experience now. I frequently say it. If you want to know what's going to happen in America, look at South Africa, and then you're looking at 6 months into our future. So Gideon's going to talk to us a little bit. I've got a series of questions here I want to ask him about what's going on and how we can better prepare here for some of the things that are happening. So let's start, Gideon, with you giving us just a current sit rep. What's going on? What's the climate? What's the air feel like in South Africa right now?
I'll give a big picture overview without boring people with too much detail. So and I think it's relevant globally from an energy point of view, we are sitting at record high fuel prices, as in the highest we've had in South African history. This is having a massive knock-on effect on our economy because about 77% of our land freight is now moved by road because of our deteriorating rail infrastructure, of which 33% has gone missing, as in completely gone, since 2020 during the lockdown. Not that the rail infrastructure was, and I need to clarify this, was in good shape before this. They just took like decaying, underutilized and underexpanded rail infrastructure that was already in a bad way and just removed a third of it. So we're very reliant on road transport for the movement of goods and people commuting to work. So the fuel price at this level is going to have a massive effect on the cost of living, and it's going to be a very acutely felt pressure, which feeds into instability. So we'll get back to that point in a minute. The second part of the energy problem is our state government electricity supplier, which is known as Eskom, which is the electricity supply corporation of South Africa. They have been mismanaged to the extent over the past 30 odd years that we're sitting with rolling blackouts, uncontrolled rolling blackouts because of the strain on the grid. That at its peak this past week and a half has left parts of the country without electricity for an excess of 12 hours a day, which is extensive. Okay, that's like Zimbabwe level problems. And it's cost our economy close to, I think, 4 billion Rand a day, which is a massive implication in that regard. So bad news on that front as well. Crime situation, I think we had about 22% increase in homicide year on year in the first quarter this year. Most of our other violent interpersonal crimes have also increased, especially also property crimes or crimes against property. We're sitting with an intelligence report that came out today that details a possible second bout of July widespread civil unrest like we had in July last year in KZN province and Gauteng province, about 5 major metros affected by it. And they love using the word insurrection because January 6th made that a thing. In this case, there's a certain level of merit to it. The Democrats would disagree with me, but I mean, when you have actual armed people with guns organizing to move around and essentially make an entire province of a country ungovernable by its central government, that could possibly satisfy the definition of an armed insurrection. But I don't know. I'm not an expert. So on all these things, we've had massive increases in cost of living, a deteriorating safety and security situation that's actually at a crisis level, and everything else that feeds into it. There's good news to this as well. It's not just all bad, because as everything has been going down the toilet, private sector initiatives, citizen initiatives and mutual assistance group initiatives has been actually plugging a lot of the holes and have just, in fact, taken over roles that government has been failing to deliver services in. So people haven't been sitting on their hands and despairing. That there are solutions being brought into play, but the major speed bump, or rather obstruction for more widespread solutions to these problems being implemented, is the government just not letting go of its monopoly in those areas.
I think you made one great point there that I really wanted to mention is the private sector is picking up the slack. So what a lot of our American viewers don't realize is that in South Africa, if you actually want quality police protection, you have to hire private security. You have private alarm response and things like that, right? Alarm response units and things.
Yeah, we've got a very well developed private security infrastructure that does what we call armed response. So yeah, and in other aspects, I think per capita we probably have one of the biggest private security industries in the world. Specifically,
and that's from need, right? That's because that's just the way that life is there. And so I've long posited that in America we're eventually going to get to a point where we're going to be just like that. So in order to run your food to market, if you're a farmer, you're going to have to hire a Iraq style security unit to run your goods into town for you so that they don't get robbed. And, people at first were like, oh, that's just silly. That's just silly. Well, I'm seeing in Metro Detroit at the smaller convenience stores, when they get a delivery of food, an armed guard arrives and stands by while they unload that truck so that nobody steals everything from it. And I know that over the holiday weekend, there was advisory from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms that said that if you're doing a bulk transport of explosives, meaning fireworks, you need to have armed security. And we don't mean armed security like Pinkerton and Brinks. We mean like legit guys. And so, turn into a business opportunity. And it worked out well, but I see it going up that way. You mentioned the rolling blackouts, and that's something that we're seeing coming to America. And when we had our first one a couple of weeks ago in Columbus, Ohio, there were 100-degree days, and they said, hey, the power's going out for the next 3 days in Columbus so that it doesn't crash in both Cleveland and Cincinnati. So the poor folks in Columbus, Ohio had to go through 100-degree days with no power. And I said at the outset that this is a perfect recipe for violence to be caused. And sure enough, at a cooling center, we had a homicide over a dispute over who was in line where and who was going to get in the cooling center and who wasn't. What are the 12-hour rolling blackouts? What sort of effect are they having on the security situation and then on your food storage situation?
So the fortunate thing about having a power grid that's been mismanaged for a better part of 17 years is that we've had rolling blackouts of varying intensity since about 2007, I think, roughly 2008. And what this has done, because it started at a low intensity back then, it slowly started creating the normalization of private institutions and people having backups available. So most major shopping centers or shopping malls and shops where you could buy food and fresh produce, as well as hospitals and the like, have a relatively well-developed backup power system now, whether it's massive diesel generators that can run for hours at a time and supply all the electricity needs, or if it's a solar setup. And the only reason we're going solar in South Africa is it's incredibly expensive and not always very practical, but it's easy to install and requires very little maintenance. And there's a lot of it going around. So most places are on diesel backups, solar, a combination of both. And in the private sector, it's having an impact because it's making the cost of doing business very expensive. It's highly disruptive, and it's having an extremely negative effect on our telecommunications networks because our cell towers all have backup batteries in them. There are two problems with this. The one, the backup battery isn't designed to have power interrupted to it at the frequency it's being interrupted at the moment, or for the length it's being interrupted. So the batteries are busy deteriorating, so that when the power goes off, I'm down the street from a cell phone tower. My signal goes from full to 1 bar the moment the power drops, even though, and I lose all data connectivity on my cell phone. Another problem that we have in South Africa is these batteries are worth about 20,000 Rand, which is a lot of money per battery, a while back. And you had whole syndicates of criminals that would break into the cell phone towers to steal the batteries at a stage, which means that a lot of the cell phone towers that aren't well protected end up, if the power goes down, that you lose that tower. And I think, as someone who's ignorant of how cell phone networks work, if a tower drops off a network, it actually has a sort of compound negative effect on the rest of the network's integrity. So we're seeing interrupted telecommunications where people can't download stuff off the cloud, which is, here's a free lesson. Physical storage media is a really good thing. If it's a vital piece of information, either have it in paper, like, oh, here we go, Joe. Either have it in paper, like one of these.
Nice.
Okay? Or
Awesome.
have it on compact disc or DVD, or written down somewhere, but or on a flash drive. But make sure that if it's electronic information, that relying on cloud storage in a fully functioning society is really convenient. But in reality, if you can't get onto the cloud because your network is down or very compromised or weakened, or the server that you're trying to access is, its battery backups have failed, which is another problem we're seeing now with the rolling blackouts, is we're seeing servers fail, or their battery backups fail, stuff like that, if they're not properly powered. So there's a big problem with internet connectivity as well as cell phone connectivity as a result of the blackouts. So
yeah, so that's important. I talk about this all the time, is that everyone signs up for every possible cloud storage service, and that's silly. And where it's particularly troubling is like your photos. A lot of people say, I'm not going to worry about backing up my photos because Google has them or Amazon has them. That's a really bad idea, because a lot of those are memories, right? Download them into a file, into a drive. I'm sure Watcher has some sort of an idea for that, but you need to have flash drives. And there's some good ones you can buy. Like I use Survivor drives. I don't know if you guys have ever seen them, but a Survivor drive, it's made by SanDisk, but it's essentially a cruiser drive inside of a metal case. So it's EMP proof, it's waterproof, it floats, and it's a little more well protected against damage because it's in a metal tube. So you definitely need your data on something you can get to that's not reliant on a network.
Yeah, if you're out there and you're on the low end side of the budget, just know that SD cards may be one of the most resilient forms of storage man has yet invented, especially with a good case.
And actually, you're seeing that now. A lot of laptops are coming, instead of with a SATA drive, they're coming with an SD card for that very reason. So one of the other follow-up questions was, what about personal food storage at home? Having 12 to 18 hours of no electricity means a lot of spoiled food. So how do you deal with that?
So at this stage, and thank you for actually bringing us back to the food storage, because food storage at a commercial level isn't a problem yet, with a big like asterisk and about that long disclaimer underneath the yet. But food storage at home, because the rolling blackouts at this stage are on intervals. So you're without power for 2 to 2.5 hours, then you've got electricity again for 4 hours, then you're without power again for 2 to 2.5 hours. So it rolls over, that you're not sitting with a full 12 hours, for example, in one go without power. However, you can imagine there are problems manifesting in the sake of that. As the grid gets brought back online in your area, there are usually huge amounts of power spikes happening that has fried people's fridges and other electronics dead. It also has the thing that it starts blowing substations and transformers, which means that the entire area could sit without electricity for 24 to 48 hours while that's repaired. And the electricity provider, the state electricity provider, has admitted in the paper today, this morning, that they're running out of spare parts to do repairs on these sorts of things. So that's pretty grim. What it will do to you at home, though, is food storage at home, refrigeration wise, is going to become, in my opinion, a potential massive problem. So you need to start looking at people need to start looking at alternatives to refrigeration, whether we're talking here about old school pickling or preserving of food, or biltong beef jerky, as in you salt it and you dry it, or just dry stores and you cook it or boil it when you need it. I've got a fair amount of lentils and split peas that I've stocked up slowly over time because they keep for a very, very long period of time, and they're a good source of plant-based protein and they don't spoil. But I'm off grid, so my fridge doesn't worry about a rolling blackout. The problem is, though, that my neighbors might not have that luxury, and most people around me might not have that luxury. So that brings a whole different challenge into the picture. And I think
you don't want to be walking out with an ice cold beer that came out of your fridge when nobody else has one. That's a sure way to have violence come around.
Exactly. So discretion, it's difficult and here's the thing about people talking about solar power. You try to hide a whole bunch of solar panels on your roof from other people, good luck with that. So people are going to know that house over there has electricity.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I always mentioned too about food storage is, listen, if everyone else in your neighborhood is getting skinnier and skinnier and you're out grilling steaks every day, you're going to have a problem when your neighbors come around. So yeah, you have to have a little bit of security in your food thoughts. And you know what, Gideon mentioned something, chat, that I want you all to know. He mentioned the word biltong. If you have never tried biltong, you are missing out on one of the greatest things in life.
The only reason that Joe Dolio is not currently reaching over to grab a square of it to show you right now is that he's already greedily eaten all of it in front of me before he sent me a single piece. Just so you're aware, chat.
And there is at least one stream where I have said, oh, I have a package of biltong right here. Biltong is like beef jerky, only good. So you want to try it out. It's a little more expensive, but it's very, very, very good.
It's like beef jerky, but good, or pemmican without the berries, or like
right.
There's a lot of good.
It's pretty solid stuff. That's pretty cool, and it's great bush food. Throw it in your backpack and take it with you, and it's pretty amazing. So what you mentioned gas prices being up, and we mentioned the electricity. What's the food supply situation in general in South Africa right now?
So the present situation is still fine. The future situation is what concerns me. So right. I'm not going to tell you anything now that you're probably not acutely aware of already. And it's the price of fertilizer has gone through the roof, with the price of gasoline and diesel being through the roof. That has an implication of what a farmer's input costs pertaining to growing crops is. And there's already been talk in some of our farmers magazines that a lot of the large scale commercial farmers are deeply concerned about, will they be able to afford to put a crop in the ground this season, or will they be able to afford to actually harvest it when it's time? And we've already seen retailers absorb some of the inflation where they haven't, and this is kind of unheard of from big retailers and small ones, is they tend to just pass the price on straight to the consumer. If there's a price increase, it's like, yeah, well, we're all pushing our prices up at the same time. There's been a reluctance to do that, in the sense of they're holding back on the price increase by lowering their profit margin, or in some other cases, if something's too expensive, they don't stock it anymore. So we're already seeing a lack of variety in some produce that's just not available at the moment. What the next thing is going to be is it's going to lead to increased prices and then additional scarcity. So unless there's a massive reversal of the present sort of global trend of fertilizer prices and fuel prices, and including LPG prices, the food price inflation is going to be severe here. And South Africa is a country where we have a large part of the population. I'm going to lie to you if I tell you the percentage, but a good, probably close to 10 or 20 million people are living like on or underneath the bread line. You bump that bread line up a bit more, and you have 2/3 of the population living underneath the bread line. And that's never good for social stability or political stability. And that always leads to another thing. And here's the one thing about Africa. There's a lot to be said about Africa being a fairly sort of violent continent. It actually isn't really. It takes a lot to galvanize Africans into violence, but because they're quite patient people. But the day that damn wall breaks, it is next level bad. And I've seen the cracks in this wall for a while, and I am a bit concerned about what's going to happen when it does break. I would not want to be someone who's in political office when it breaks, because you're going to die. That's just,
Yes,
and horribly. There's already been a case of, if you're a politician in this country, you have a target on your back, and the only thing that's keeping you safe right now is that you can still afford a VIP protection detail. The moment that those guys have to abandon you because they need to look after their own families and you're on your own, good luck. And yeah, so to come back to the food situation, it's still stable at the moment, but the outlook's negative. That's the way an economist would put it. And my dog is really needy, but I'll say hi to the people, Paulie. There you go.
She just wants, or she, he, whichever, just wants everyone to know what's going on in South Africa, and she would like treats. So,
yeah.
So that's kind of the same situation we're seeing here, and I want to point out that hungry people overthrow governments, right? And that's where the problem is going to come in, is when all of these food problems catch up with us, like the lack of ability to fertilize crops and things like that. It's going to be a problem not just for South Africa or America, but for the entire world. And I'll just be honest, Africa in general will be hit harder than the rest because they're already reliant on food exports. And that's not always the case.
And I would just like to answer Andrew's question in the comment section. Sorry, I'm just keeping half an eye on it. Do we have a food stamp program? Not quite, but we've got something called government grants. And it's a welfare check, essentially, that people get once a month. And it's not a lot of money. I think it's the equivalent to, jeepers, not even $100, maybe $150 max a month that people are given, and they need to cover all their costs of living on that. And the problem is, we've got 20 million people on government grants. That's a third of our population. And that number is increasing, and the government's ability to pay for it is declining, because here's something that people don't want to talk about. Those grants aren't sourced from the tax base. Our tax base isn't big enough to pay for 20 million people to sit on grants, because our tax base is apparently 3 million. So if you say, 3 million people are paying for 20 million, it's worse. About 2/3 of our taxes are sourced from only about 250,000 individual taxpayers, who cover who carry the majority of that burden. So in the words of Stefan Molyneux, South Africa is a penal colony of welfare addiction. The government can't cut the welfare checks because it would be political suicide for them to do it, and it would probably lead to the country burning almost overnight. On the other hand, they're just waiting for it to hit the wall, because there's no way they can carry on paying it. In fact, they can't even afford the interest payments on the loans they need to take out in order to keep paying this. So it's the
same as in America. It's what's called an unfunded liability, right? It's not in your budget, but you're paying it anyway. It's what I call magic money that comes from nowhere, but at the end of the year, you do have to pay for it. It's a house of cards, and it'll fall over. You're absolutely right. Hold on.
As I'm the only one without dog issues, I'll carry the conversation here for just a moment. So speaking of food supplies, support Tactical Wisdom by purchasing gear from My Patriot Supply using his referral link. Thank you, C. Goody, for being an excellent mod. We appreciate the hell out of you. So, Gideon, is there anything else specifically that before I let Joe get you back, and I know you got to get going here pretty quickly, is there any other specific outtakes that you want our American and other viewers to know, maybe Dutch, who might be suffering some of the same food shortage stuff here pretty soon?
Sorry, the interesting thing about what's happening in the Netherlands, and I see it's spread to Germany and Italy as well, if I'm reading correctly, that is a protest against an impossible restriction from a government onto its food producing sector. It eventually had nothing, there was nothing more to go, and it gave in, and this is what you get. In South Africa, we don't quite have, we've got different challenges regarding food production, and a lot of it is related to crime, violence in the rural areas, and labor related issues, and so on and so forth. But the problem is, this is almost at an esoteric level discussion, because the average person watching this, unless you're farming, there's nothing you can do to make your farmers' input costs less. Well, except vote. But that's a 2024 problem for you guys as well, I think. All you can do is stuff that's in Joe's book, and you can see what the second and third order effects of a crisis are going to be. You can intelligently formulate a rational response to that. And I don't mean to keep plugging his book, but it's kind of in here already what you can do. And a lot of the stuff in Joe's book is something that I've actually gone and actually applied to the situation here, for the simple reason that it's rational and it makes complete sense. And the stuff that makes sense in my mind, and it actually dovetails perfectly with what I'm observing in my society, what the challenges that I see could happen without having to focus on something specific. Because if I were a doomsday prepper and I live in South Africa, I'd go nuts, because which crisis am I going to pick to prep for? Because there's like 10 million, and any of them, and they're all equally likely, and it's impossible. But I can prepare for what would be common denominators present in all of those crises when they manifest. In fact, they might all happen at the same time. I don't know. There's much that good people can do in order to protect themselves, protect their families, their community members, and build resilience. Because once you have there it goes, hang on, stuff's falling off my desk, thanks to my dog. This is really professional. There's a lot you can do to build your individual resilience, then build your household resilience, your community resilience, and encourage others to do it. You end up with islands of resilience in the sea of chaos that you can turn into a chain of islands in a while. And when you've got a chain of islands, you can build a continent of resilience. And it's really about just building a barrier between yourself and chaos. And I know that's possible to be done. There's going to be a lot of people you can't reach, you can't help. But in the South African petri dish, I don't know how much of this stuff is going to happen to America, but I think the challenges will be kind of similar. We've got one thing that you guys don't, though, or rather vice versa, is I don't think our racial tension, bizarrely, is as bad as it is in the States. Not in all areas, because racial tension depends upon which side of the conservative, postmodern liberal line you fall on. And I know you guys might be going through a bit of a national divorce, and Joe, you can probably fill me in on that. But a good friend of me said that when you have two sides in the same country that can't even agree on the definition of murder, how are you going to ever reconcile those two sides to wanting to build together on the same project? And I don't have an answer for that. And that's, in South Africa, we have 11 different groups that can't agree on the definition of anything. So I think we've kind of figured out that going our separate ways is eventually going to happen.
Well, I'll tell you, the Joe Dolio prediction has always been that World War III will not be a major power competition. It will be a collection of civil wars throughout the world, because we're just at an inflection point. So I think you're right there. And I think Stan on our Future Conflict show, the Future Gentleman, or the Virginia Gentleman, says it the best. I have nothing in common with these people, and they have nothing in common with me. So what's the point, right? At some point, that has to come to a head, and has to come to violence. In all honesty, we all hope for this peaceful divorce scenario, but that's a fallacy. We had a peaceful divorce in the United States in 1860, and by 1861, there was a war going on between those peacefully divorced states. So I just think that you have to prepare, just like Gideon said there, using my theory of don't prepare for any one event, prepare for the second and third order effects, because no matter what your preferred doomsday scenario is, whether it's an asteroid strike or an earthquake or an invasion by China, the second and third order effects are all the same. No power, no food, no water. people behaving badly. So if you prepare for those effects, you're going to be ready for literally anything that happens to you. And on the farm part, or on the growing food part, you can grow your own food. It's a superpower. Learn how, get out and grow some. So this year, all I've got is a couple of tomato plants, some pepper plants growing, and some lettuce, but it's something. It's better than nothing. So I guess the best advice that I would give to anyone is, when we see things getting worse in society, we know that food is going to become a problem. You remove your issues by growing your own food, or having the ability to produce your own food. Learn how to fish, learn how to hunt, learn how to trap. These are ways in which you can be producing your own food instead of being reliant on somebody else. And that's the biggest thing. So on the topic of self-reliance, I want to talk about farm attacks, but earlier you said Zimbabwe, and I'm going to go with my favorite line from the movie Blood Diamond. So they're at the bar, and he's about to dance he's starting dancing with the reporter, and the reporter asks him where he's from, and he goes, "I'm from Rhodesia." And she goes, "Rhodesia? Don't we say Zimbabwe now?" And he looks at her and goes, "Do we?" That's the best line in the whole movie. Make Zimbabwe Rhodesia again. But I don't say that from a love of apartheid standpoint. I say it from the fact that Rhodesia was the breadbasket of Africa. It literally produced enough food to feed everyone. And now, thanks to farm attacks and driving off the white farmer, we don't have that anymore. So what's the status on farm attacks in South Africa?
So it's the same horrible story, I think, or miserable story. It's been for a while, in the sense of there's been no dramatic uptick in it. It's kind of stable, and it still hasn't actually been addressed. But here's the thing: people keep asking the government to help and intervene in the farm attack problem. I keep telling them that you're asking an entity that is firstly not interested in helping you, and secondly, and I'm not accusing them of this, but I'm saying that they probably have a strong incentive, according to their own internal party doctrine, called the National Democratic Revolution, which is a communist Marxist document that specifically mentions the nationalization of the land, which is all of it into the hands of the central government. Very much Mao's Great Leap Forward type thinking here. Why would they intervene to save the very people they want to dispossess from being driven off their property by criminals or murdered? I mean, the government might not be complicit in it, but they sure as hell have no incentive to stop it. So
I'm actually going to go a step further than you, and I'm going to say your government is complicit, because I've seen some of the gear being carried on the backs of some of the people committing these attacks. You don't just walk into a store in South Africa, of all places, and buy a cell phone jammer.
Yeah. No, this is the thing. So I purely said what I said because I'm trying to be the overly reasonable.
Oh yeah, no, you live there. I get it.
but the thing is, and here's the thing that also people don't understand about this: the government, as its whole entity, might be entirely not complicit, but because it's so fractured, there are certainly individuals within the government that have been appointed by the elected officials into positions of power and management that are probably doing exactly that because they have an agenda that's pro it, or because there might be some central document in Luthuli House stating its desirability. So, and here's the thing: I live in a country where the government murdered like 200 mental patients by removing them from a private hospital group and into a state facility where they were systematically starved to death through incompetence. I live in a country where my government is murdering sick children by stage 6 rolling blackouts, where the hospitals are not supposed to be load shed, the state hospitals at least, but they are load shed due to incompetence and due to a criminal level of negligence. That state hospital's emergency generator doesn't work, and it goes offline. The hospital goes offline, and those little babies that are on, they are intubated and on respirators and stuff, they die as a result of that power outage. So I've got a government that murders its own citizens and kids, not because purely out of malice, but worse, because it is so far removed and so incompetent and so indifferent to their lives and their suffering, it just lets them die, and it couldn't care less. And that is the same people that my tribe asks several times a year to intervene and save them from farm murders. It's madness. It's not going to happen.
I'll tell you, things like that go underreported, because we know that during Hurricane Katrina here, the very same thing happened in New Orleans. And afterward, a decision was made by the county prosecutor's office to not try intentional overdoses done by nurses on critical patients in the hospital. So it sounds like a lot of fancy words, but that's literal murder. They went around to some of the patients they felt they couldn't move in the power outage and the flood, and they gave them overdoses of morphine to stop their heart and stop their breathing. It really is that evil, and it does happen, and it is intentional. So you're right. It's criminal negligence that rises to the level of culpability. It's very sad. And on the farm attacks, guys, for those of you who don't know, basically it's farmers get isolated. They notice all of a sudden their cell phone doesn't work, and people attack the farm. And there's been several murders. There's been fires. It's a horrible thing. And that's where you see some of these images of armored tractors, right? Putting up metal shielding around their tractors for protection and things like that. It can be tough. I can't imagine that here. But Clay Martin, another author of books that will help you get through these things, he mentioned the potential for farm attacks here in America and wrote a book called Prairie Fire about how to protect your rural area or farm from it. So with all of this going on in South Africa, I know you got a time limit, but I have a couple more quick questions. How do you maintain situational awareness when you're out and about in a society that's in this stage of where I say near collapse, right? You're literally a knife edge away from a total collapse there. It's still functioning and still running as a normal society for the most part, but at any moment it can be a total and complete collapse. So how do you maintain that edge?
So we have the fortunate sort of side effect of apartheid spatial planning and urban development, and I say that ironically because it's not fortunate, because that's kind of a major reason as to why this country looks the way it looks. But the S will hit the fan first on the periphery. If you're living in the periphery, you're in harm's way. But also a disclaimer on that. In July last year, it didn't hit the fan in the periphery. It hit the fan in the middle of a major urban center, and it quickly consumed the surrounding area. So actually, I talk complete nonsense there. Maintaining situational awareness. I don't do anything differently than I would normally do, in the sense of you need to learn how to read body language, and you need to essentially keep your head on a swivel when you're out and about, I think, in any society. I never went to the Middle East. I never had to patrol really populated markets in places like Fallujah or Baghdad. So I have absolutely no idea what your situational awareness would be like on a daily basis as a soldier in a hostile work environment like that. But what I can tell you is, if you walk the street in a third world country, you kind of develop after a while an acute sense for what fits baseline and what does not. And unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of people that live in the suburbs here have no clue what a baseline is or looks like. They might see someone next to the street eyeing their car and think, oh, that's funny, I wonder why that guy's there. Or actually, they won't think that, because they'll be on their cell phone at the red traffic light. Or they'll be distracted by something else and they will not be paying attention, and that's how you fall victim to a smash and grab attack or something like that, or a mugging. I would not say that situational awareness in this context is different to any other type of situational awareness, where you need to just have a healthy understanding. But we've also seen that the currents change when it talks to popular uprising stuff. It changes quickly, but not without warning. There is a clear intent telegraphed in the media, on social media, where it's in plain sight, that there are very vocal people making very specific threats. And it's easy to discount those threats as just being swagger or bluster. I've done it myself to my own detriment in the past, but right now I'm taking pretty much everything people say seriously on face value until further investigation tells me it's not real, or it's just it's a scam.
Right.
I don't know if that is directly translatable to America as well, because having seen what the left, the violent left in the US telegraph regularly about what their intentions are to people who are politically different to them, what they would like to do, for example, to Supreme Court justices, how they would actually arrive at these people's houses on a physical protest that's probably just this hair's breadth away from turning violent. I do not know how you would, what your threat indicators would be, or your what you call early warning indicators would be that a specific event is probably going to go south. But I'd assume there would be some sort of overlap on that.
Yeah. So yeah, you really have to be paying attention. And I mentioned that a lot about the cell phone thing. People just do it a lot. And particularly in South Africa, you have a problem where people drive through their gated entrance and they think, oh, I'm through the gate, I'm fine. But they're so focused on whatever they're doing that they don't realize that 4 guys just followed them through the gate on foot when they drove through, and then they get robbed as they're getting out of their car. You've seen that several times. We've showed a couple of the videos where those ended in homicide, right? They go to get out of their car and they get shot because they thought, hey, I'm inside my own gate, but somebody was hiding in the bushes right next to the gate and followed you through, or they had hopped the wall already or whatever. We as a society have become so tied to our technology that we are completely lacking in situational awareness. And that's just troubling. So that's a good point. I think situational awareness failures led to the assassination of Shinzo Abe last night. His security team should have been way more situationally aware than they were. And I think everyone just has to be really paying attention. The last question I have for you before I give a few tips of my own for people is, what actions should people here take as we get closer to the same situation you're in? In other words, what would you have done differently, or what have you done to get yourself ready for where you are now?
There's a good couple of things. And I think the first thing I'm going to mention is it ties directly in with the situational awareness. And it's a cliche because it's mentioned so often, but geez, like, is it true? This concept of thinking that it will not happen to me is, I think, has gotten more people killed or disabled or otherwise brutalized than anything else. This firm belief that, this is stuff that happens to other people, the living in denial of that a threat actually exists. It might not be in your face right now, but that doesn't mean it's not out there, and it doesn't mean that might not meaningfully manifest in a way that directly affects you the moment that you leave your front door. So you need to have a change of mindset, firstly, pertaining to your own safety, security, and what you're willing to do to safeguard that. The next step beyond cultivating the right mindset, in my opinion, would be to develop yourself. And this isn't just, you don't have to go LARPing in like a plate carrier and night vision goggles on a shooting range and skinny jeans. You can really start with the very basics of functional fitness, which is something the overwhelming majority of people don't invest in. Yeah. Because fitness sucks. Okay, I'm going to be the first to admit it. I hate cardio. I hate most things. I do it purely for the purpose of I don't want to die. That is my primary motivator.
That's a great point. I don't want to die.
Yeah, for going to exercise. The one, and I know I'm not going to, my risk of heart disease is probably lower if I exercise. And the second part is, if I'm in a violent confrontation, I stand a better chance of prevailing because I'm fitter and I'm stronger than I would otherwise have been. We spend a large majority of our lives sitting behind a desk. It's the reality of the 21st century. We have to kind of mitigate that. The next thing is develop a skill set to protect yourself. And this, we can talk guns. We can talk guns for a whole episode, and defensive shooting skills and all this sort of stuff makes sense. That's important. Unarmed stuff is highly important. You instructor in multiple unarmed disciplines yourself, Joe. There's nothing I can tell you about that. But I love the other stuff you mentioned: growing your own food, hardening the place you live, and hardening yourself, hardening your home, hardening your community and your neighborhood, and so on and so forth. Those are important things. Building resilience. I could summarize all of these things as that is, you want to be independent from the outside world as much as possible, pertaining your own survivability in a crisis. You want to have some sort of plan, knowing full well that the plan is not going to be executable, because it's probably, life will not go according to the plan you have for it, but at least you have a framework to bounce off of and be adaptable to. So change your mindset, understand that there are risks, and accept it, make peace with it, and embrace it. Develop yourself, develop your body, your skills, your knowledge, those good things. Get the correct tools in place and make yourself resilient and independent. I think
That's good stuff. I think that self-reliance and resiliency are the biggest thing. Get out and learn any kind of martial art. I mean, I teach Chung Soo Do and Krav Maga, but literally do anything, which is better than the nothing you're currently doing. So get out and learn some sort of a martial art, something, because you might be attacked at close range. You got to be able to defend yourself. The other thing that I'll point out that's important is communications. Get some type of a radio and learn how to use it. This book of mine, the newer one, oh shoot, I got my background up, you can't see it, never mind. It says contact. I'm trying to hold up a camouflage book on a camouflage background, and it's not working.
You know what? It's that good. Just know, everyone, we've talked about how much camo Joe has. Just know that if you ever see Joseph Dolio, it's because he wants you to.
I'm not. Yeah, you're not the one I'm there for. If you see me, you're not the one I'm there for. But my contact and notes notebook, and it's got spots in there for you to put radio frequencies, how to plan out your team. It's got sketch paper. It's got all kinds of cool stuff in there. And I've got book 4 coming out very soon. That is that's going to be on a little more spicy skills. It's scouting and patrolling. So there's doing reconnaissance patrolling. There's movement, but then there's also ambushes and some other things in there that you might need. If bad guys are in your neighborhood, it's better to fight them way away from you than it is up against your front door. What was that, Gideon?
Which book was that one? Number?
It's going to be book 4, scouting and patrolling. It's not here yet.
So not one of these.
Not one of those. Oh, and the other one's called Contacts and Notes. It's just a little notebook. So yeah, you gotta be getting ready. You got to be preparing. So get radios, learn how to use them, because you can at least, if you've got a network of people, right, and you say, hey, listen, they're coming to my house, you've at least called to someone on the radio, and you've got friends coming who can come and help you out. So you got to be doing it. You got to start paying attention to what goes on around you. Gideon, where can people find you on the internet if they so are so inclined?
So you can find me on my website, which is paratus.info, and that links to all my social media from there as well. There's little icons you can click. That's where I write or publish all my own articles and blog posts. And in fact, I'll send a few to our central hub, Joe, for further publication and syndication, whatever it's called. The ones that might be useful. Also on the comm side, I cannot confirm nor deny that something that rhymes with Hao Weng makes a fairly okay, cheap Oriental radio. Yes. And I've been quite impressed with it, considering it's cheap as chips. And it speaks to you in Chinese when you turn it on. It's amazing.
It does. But I'm going to tell you, I bought this new one of theirs. I'll hold it up in front of me so you can actually see it. The 152. This thing is solid. It's a little more pricey, but it's a really good radio.
Boy, and remember, chat, that they do make all kinds of interesting attachments to those that might be able to boost the signal. I don't know, just all kinds of things.
I don't have it right here in front of me, but I've got like the old school Vietnam era, or well, not Vietnam era, even to current era radio microphones. Yeah, good stuff. So yes, that name that shall not be named does make some pretty good radios for not a lot of money that actually get pretty good range. Yeah. All right. So where can we find the Watcher on the web?
Oh, the mods have been fantastic about dropping that into the chat. If you guys don't know where to find us at this point, just look into the chat. You're going to see it there. But find me at Twitter. Find me on YouTube. I'm probably going to be live sometime this evening. If we're not live on this channel, we'll be live on my channel. Because there's very likely to be some serious spice going down in Akron tonight. We have some insider information that lets us know that some big leaguers may be coming into town.
Yeah, we might have had eyes on some of them earlier today. and overnight. But here's the thing: that's the Joe Stradamus prediction for today. Akron is about to go off the hook. And then I don't know yet. I haven't done much digging. There may be sympathetic protests because we had a police killing here in Detroit. Even though it's cut and dried, these people don't care. So we'll have to see what happens. As the closer we get, you have to watch it and watch for more and more of these protests. And if you find yourself in one, don't be the hero. Find a way out as quick as you can. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to add was to Gideon's thing about fitness. Get out, throw on a backpack, and walk. That is the number one fitness thing you can do to get ready for the times that are coming, because Americans and South Africans and Western society in general are not used to walking pretty much anywhere, right? Our daughter, who lives 4 houses away, drives to the mailbox, okay? Get out and walk and do that. All right. That's all that I have, gents. I know that we were up against a hard time at 12:45, so I thank the chat for being here, and we're grateful. And I hope that the information we provided helped you out.
And like we said, stay tuned for more updates. Look on our Twitters. We'll see you soon. Thanks, chat. Bye-bye. Gideon, you get the last word. Tell them bye.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me back on the channel. It's always a pleasure speaking to both of you, gents, and I look forward to some more updates, hopefully soon. Watch the Petri dish.
Yeah, right on. Right on.
All right. With that, thanks, chat. Bye-bye. All right. It is officially ended.